So hello, we are here today
Hi.
with Julie. Hello, Julie. Julie is here because we're going to talk about her experience studying abroad in England. Tell us about yourself. What do you do?
Well, nowadays I work for a network specialist, so I've gone into lobbying, which wasn't intentionally what I wanted to do, but not doing what I intentionally wanted to do was a bit of the pattern through the whole story, really. I studied in Cologne at first, and I joined law school mainly because, well, A, the discussion we all have with our families, do something useful, and B, because I wanted to study something that was a combination out of logic and language, and I just thought that would be the right choice. But then after a semester, I figured out that I just felt like I was going into what is in Germany a very, very long course that doesn't really reflect on your capabilities. It is made to be very tough, so you're just barely getting by. Everyone does. You can be as intelligent as you want. The grading is just, frankly, really unfair. And I just felt really frustrated by that. And I thought, why am I doing this? And I thought, well, someday I'm going to do a great job that I'm going to need to be a lawyer for. And I thought, well, that's stupid. Why would I study something that I'm not remotely interested in because I'm going to have a great job with that someday? Mm-hmm. So I came up to the thought that I had to take some time for myself to figure out what I actually wanted to do. And that's how I moved to the UK, because I had a friend there. And then, well, as I was there and started working, you know, like the casual gastronomy jobs that people do at that age, I just realized I really need to study, but it took me a bit of time to then figure out that I was interested in languages. And I made the somewhat bizarre choice to study French in England.
So wait a second, you went to England, but did you speak English before you went to England?
Mm-hmm. I did. Well, I learned it at school. In Germany, we start, nowadays it's even earlier, they start at elementary school. We had colors and names and whatnot in elementary school, but not much really. But then as I went on to secondary education, I think secondary is after high school in British or American countries. But for us, the secondary step is from 5th grade onward, as we call it. So after 5 years of elementary education.
That's true.
And that's where we started with foreign languages. When I went abroad, I only realized how good the German school education is on languages. I think there is a major difference between what my English peers at university had learned about French at school in comparison to what I had done. Mm-hmm. I think there is a major difference in the way that they teach languages at school here.
Sorry, in high school you studied English and French.
Mm-hmm. We had to take either English or French when we were about 10 years old. And then 2 years later, we had to choose from a number of different foreign languages to just pick one. You could pick French, but there was also Latin or Italian, Spanish, Russian. There were quite a few. But I wanted to do French because it was pretty close to the border. And I thought, well, that'd be easy to use.
Did you have any knowledge of French before? I thought I understood from you at one stage you had some ties to France, no?
Mm-hmm. My family used to travel a lot to France before I was born, and they were quite mentally, emotionally associated with France, but I never grew up speaking French or anything. But what I have to say is that growing up with a Greek father was helping a lot in learning the languages. Although I am convinced that anyone with a bit of a musical ear can learn a language, it's nothing that no one can learn. It's dedication, really, most of all.
You started your studies in Germany, then you transferred to England. What was the transfer process like? What did you have to do? What could a person who's potentially thinking about doing that, what can they expect to happen? For
me, it was a bit easier than it would be for someone who's in the middle of their studies, because I quit my studies in Germany and then I went to the UK and then I figured out I wanted to do something else and then I just applied for it. But what I could fathom that would be quite difficult for someone who's transferring is getting the credits over to your degree in the new country, because not all systems are the same. So it is worth considering before you study whether you want to study in a different country or whether you want to concentrate being in a different country on your Erasmus year. I think that makes a lot of sense. So, and if you are as lucky, if you want to say as I was, that you want to switch courses, then it's a good point really to decide, well, I want to go abroad and I want to change classes, so I'm just going to do something completely different now. So that's the credit transferal point. The other thing that's actually quite challenging that I experienced myself as well is the onboarding process to really get into the whole application process, because in Germany it's a whole story of admitting your high school papers and, you know, leveling to a certain numerous clauses, we call it, where your grades are in line with the expectations and everything. Clearly you have that in every country, but I think every country has very different processes in it. And the UK, for instance, they have this online system called UCAS. And frankly, if I wouldn't have had a friend of mine who I was at that time sharing the house with, who helped me out and actually guided me through the jungle, I would have been lost. It was really difficult. So, and it's frustrating because you're very emotional and you want to get everything right. And then early 20s, you don't know anything about life and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? So, yeah. So it's always good to find someone, and most universities have that, who would be able to explain how to use the application process tools. There's some like groups that, like in the UK, I know they have that a lot, but in other countries as well, where young students meet and exchange their experiences on how to apply for university.
Okay, very good. Good tip. So you studied in Cologne, and then when you went to England, where did you study, if you don't mind?
I went to the University of Leeds. It's in the north of England, and it's one of the greatest universities on modern languages and social studies. They're very well known actually in the UK as well for their standing on those classes. So, but that was accidentally for me. I didn't really know that until I was admitted, which was great. But after that, when I realized that and they were telling me about it, I realized how lucky I had been. And that would be another tip that I would give to anyone nowadays. Look the class and the uni up before you do it, because nowadays this has become so much of a business and people don't really acknowledge that any kind of university could be offering classes to them, and then they just think, oh, that's a great pricing or that's a cool class. But you might actually get yourself into a lot of trouble if you don't get a really high acknowledged university for what you want to do.
Exactly. Did you already talk about this? Why did you stop in Germany to then continue in England? Because you didn't like what you were studying?
I just touched on that briefly earlier. You're right. I think it goes along with a major decision that people take in life on what you want to do with the time that you're given. And I stopped studying law mainly because I figured that I was doing something that I thought society was expecting me to do. Only later, when I had switched to the UK and joined the classes there, I also realized that I didn't like the way of teaching in Germany and German universities. Obviously, I haven't been to all of Germany's universities, and I can't possibly, judge all of them, but it's a completely different style of teaching. And I really appreciated in the UK, it was a very personalized approach. I had a personal tutor. I had someone who was always available for my questions, that didn't only just guide me through uni on, intellectual and subject focused terms, but they were also there for me, guiding me as a student and evolving person. And I think that's very important. I think schools should take that a lot more into consideration. And looking back in hindsight, I would probably say that was one of the major reasons that I didn't feel comfortable in my first course, and that I felt very, very well in my second.
Yeah, the first course in Germany and your second course in England.
Yeah.
Okay. Wondering how you would compare German universities to English universities. That's the major difference, mainly that English universities is more, one-on-one, as you said, and German universities is more perhaps like a lecture type setting with lots of people in an auditorium.
That's certainly one of the points. It's very anonymous and you get more lost But you'd expect that in a more individualized approach, it would be somewhat easier, or maybe more, cuts into pieces, more sort of parenting style teaching. But it wasn't that. Actually, we were very challenged in having to do a lot of reading every week, and we had very practical approaches in our seminar classes and whatnot. And they were expecting quite a lot from us, but it was different in a way that university in Germany felt very much theoretical, whilst in the UK it had a lot of practical pointers actually relating to what you could expect in later job life. And it felt easier to grasp, and it made more sense. Like, we were practicing PowerPoint presentations and how to, convince a group of people of your point of view, more so than I would possibly have done that in Germany. And also, I felt that it was a very hierarchical sort of approach that the German universities were taking. The professor was everything and the student was a nobody, whilst it was very much a community in the UK, and the teachers always felt like they wanted to learn from us and be mentored by how we see the world. And it felt like you could contribute something to what was actually being researched at uni as well. So they were taking you in onto their research topics and asking you about your opinion and how you would feel about certain topics, and it made you feel like you belonged and you mattered. And I think that is actually something that is very important for young people, to be able to contribute and share your, it's not really knowledge yet because you're still learning, but your emotions and your hopes and dreams for the world. And obviously young people have some, and I think that's what's lacking a lot in German universities. It's very much putting down and making you feel like, well, you're little, you're young, go study, and then one day you'll know, but you don't now. So
well, it sounds like an extension of the German attitude or personality.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose that our culture is a bit more hierarchical, if you like to say. Yeah, I agree on that. And we tend to, we like structures, and you can see that in the educational system as well. Mm-hmm. But another point, and frankly, I find that a bit disturbing, is also education here is mainly for free. And education in the UK isn't for free. It's seriously monetarily relevant for anyone. And obviously you get grants and you can, put that forward and then pay it back later. But it's money that you owe someone. They treat you that way. You're a client, you're a customer, and you will be treated that way. And certainly it doesn't always, all the getting you involved, it doesn't always have to do with the fact that you pay money. But it makes a difference. And I think that is actually something that the world, but that goes a bit far, should think about. Whether can we not do education that way without paying money for it? That would be great.
But the way that you just described in English university sounds very much like my American university experience. I remember when I was a first-year psychology student, I had to participate in certain experiments, which didn't take much time, 15-20 minutes, but it got me involved in the whole process of what does it mean to actually do psychology.
It's a whole different level of engagement, isn't it? Yeah, I agree. But also, it's also a question of what they believe you can achieve on a different level. For instance, when I then approached my bachelor's thesis in England, I wanted to write about how Euroscepticism in the European Parliament was influencing the way that, the whole legislative procedure changed. And as I was reading up, I decided that it would be much more interesting to turn the argument around and to have a look at how Euroscepticists actually vote in a European way, and that they actually make use of the system for their own interests. And I walked up to my tutor and I said, Charlie, don't you think that would be a great idea? And he said, well, that would be a great idea, but you'd have to interview some of them to find out. And then I was like, oh, well, that's it, done then. I can't do that. How am I going to ever interview them? And he just looked at me, what do you mean it's done? You go out there, you make appointments, you interview them. And I just thought, what? No. And he encouraged me all the way. And he was like, of course you will. You go back there, you take your, microphone and you record them. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And I did. And it was fabulous. It was great. Actually, my theory was right. And I think I would have never gone that far if I wouldn't have had a mentor in that moment telling me, of course you can, go on. And it just, yeah, I don't know, maybe that's also the British mentality, but...
The immediate challenges upon making the transfer, you already touched on that, getting through the application process, but you had a friend that helped you through that. What about moving to the country, though?
Actually, I made that very easy for myself. I just packed a big bag, booked overweight on one flight, and just went with my clothes. And in many countries, you can get housing with uni if you're wanting to. And most universities, for instance, in the UK, the first year you're living in accommodated housing anyways, to get to know your peers and to, fit in. Then in second year, people, rent a house together. So on that front, that's actually quite easy. What is a massive challenge, though, as a foreigner, and that will all change with Brexit even more, but that's just UK, is getting a bank account and getting a flat to live in. You need a bank account for, and to get a bank account, you need an address to send the mail to. Well, that's a bit, the chicken and egg discussion, and it was so daunting for me at first that I thought I was never going to get a bank account, which made my application to uni difficult. I would, if in hindsight, if I would do it again, I would sort out before I go, because I got there and I was like, well, what do I do next? And I should have probably done it the other way around. Yeah.
All right, good advice for anyone else who's thinking about doing that in the future. The best and the worst parts of studying in England.
In my first year, I went to a meeting just before uni started with a lot of Erasmus students, because I thought, well, they might experience pretty much the same thing that I'm experiencing now, so I might as well join them and see what they tell them. And that get-go meeting, there was one girl from the student union, and she was saying, so years abroad pretty much work like this. You have 3 months of high honeymoon, and then suddenly around Christmas, you just start feeling a bit annoyed about things these people do, like turkey and stuffings and Christmas pudding, and you're like, oh, why do they always stay in the line, and why does it have to be the bus on the other side? Basically what she was saying is that after a certain time of a honeymoon, you start getting really edgy and annoyed about the particularities of a certain culture, and then you sort of have a dip and you feel really depressed and you want to go home, and you feel like everything at home is so much better than where you are right now. And then around Easter, you're like, oh, well, exams around the corner, it'll be fine. And you're going, running towards the end, and then Easter comes, you're like, oh my God, I'm going home in 2 months. And you're like, oh my God, this is the best time of my life. What am I doing? Why didn't I enjoy this more? And then suddenly the year is over and you're heartbroken, and all your life you're going to be thinking back and just, oh, wasn't that the greatest year ever? And I suppose that is pretty much what I experienced in my first year at uni as well. It was a very tense situation between loving the kindness and the friendliness and the interesting different things I got to see. And I think that would probably just the same. It would be exactly the same in any other country, that anyone would feel like that. But then at some point you just get overloaded. And I got sad and I felt like I wanted to go home, and I missed the casual feeling of the known around me. But I think it's good to push past that. It's actually something that lets you grow. But because I went to that meeting and I knew this before, when it got to the time when I felt like this, I thought, wait, didn't she say that was going to happen? And it sort of made it more bearable, because I thought, well, I'm going to grow past this. It's fine. It's going to be over at some point. I don't feel great now, but it'll be better. And by the time Easter came around, I did feel better. So I don't know, proof was in the pudding, really.
It's a good thing that you went to that meeting and that you connected and that you heard those things and then it actually happened to you. But you had 3 years in England, right?
I did my full degree in the UK. And arguably, I think I went through those phases a couple of times. I think what's very important, and that's something you just said, is not to stay alone. It's really important to connect. And as much as, for instance, when I left the UK, I thought, right, guys, I love you all, but I need to go home. I'm done now. 5 years, I need to go home. It was a good experience, and then 2 years on, I'd left the UK, and I thought, well, that's it. That was my experience with the island. I'm never going back. That's not as in not visiting, but I'm not going back to live there. And 2-3 years on, I'm contemplating moving to London, and I'm like, hang on, how did that happen? But at some point, you just start missing certain things about the culture, and you start to realize how much it has affected you and it's actually changed you. So it's a huge benefit to life. And anyone that's contemplating moving abroad to study, it'd be a year or more, like I did, I would always say do it. The only thing people need to keep in mind, and that's a bit emotional, but I think it's very true, you leave a part of your soul behind. Wherever you've been, you always do, and you need to be prepared for that, because you can never be really whole again. It makes you more diverse, and it feels great because you have different spaces where you're at home, but you will always miss something.
Very powerful words. Very powerful words. I think that about wraps it up for England. Thank you very much for everyone being with us today. Make sure that you like and subscribe on the bottom, and we'll see you next time in the next video. We're going to talk to Juliane about her Erasmus experience in France. See you soon.
Yay.